Week 2 of the impeachment hearings, and a witness directly ties the president's personal attorney to a quid pro quo with Ukraine. The U.S. ambassador to the EU alleges that Rudy Giuliani pushed Ukraine to announce investigations of Joe Biden and the Democrats in relation to election interference in 2016. Recently, we brought on Senator Sherrod Brown to weigh in. He says he needs to hear all of the testimony before forming an opinion. And this weekend, we have the other side of the aisle, Senator Rob Portman from Ohio. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here, Senator Portman.
You bet. Great to be on with you.
And we are into week 2 of the public impeachment hearings in Washington. You said that you would keep an open mind. So of what you've watched so far, do you see any evidence for President Donald Trump to be impeached?
I really don't. What I see is some actions that were taken that were not appropriate, and I've said that, right after the transcript was released. But I've also said that, boy, impeachment's an awfully extreme remedy. It's removing someone from office who's been duly elected. And particularly when we're in the middle of a re-election, we're going to be voting in Ohio in less than 3 months on the presidential primary. So we just had another presidential debate last night. Seems to me we got to let the people decide, put everything out there. It's a high bar, and so I'm interested in us getting some work done. I had a teletown hall last night, and a lot of the questions I got were, why aren't you guys doing more bipartisan legislation there? Which is something I normally I'm very involved with, and I'm proud of the work we've done. But it's tough right now, to be frank with you, because impeachment kind of takes all the oxygen out of the room. It's literally when we get the impeachment over here in the Senate, which we may, you're not allowed to do anything else for weeks. And I think that's also a distraction that we got to think about, is that what's the impact of that on our country not to move forward with things like this U.S.-Mexico agreement, which will add new jobs to the Mahoning Valley, or things like prescription drug costs, getting them down. We passed something in the Senate, they passed something in the House, but we just are not working together. So there are things we can and should do. Infrastructure is another one. We passed a highway bill here in the Senate, but we are not working together. And it's hard to do that when you're in the middle of impeachment. In the Senate, it's impossible, because that's all you can work on. You can't work on other legislation. You can't work on nominations or any other issues.
Do you and the other senators have a problem with this testimony being largely hearsay? How does that impact how you would vote on this if it does make it all the way to the Senate for a vote?
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, I'm a juror in the Senate. If it comes over to us, I'm going to be listening carefully. I'm not going to prejudge anything. But yeah, not having direct knowledge certainly makes the testimony less valuable. But also, the testimony this week, although some of it's been interesting, it really hasn't changed the fundamental issue, which is, the money did go to Ukraine. I strongly supported that. I think Ukraine deserves our help. I think it's in our interest, our national security interest, to help them. As you know, I'm one of the people who pushed hard for President Obama to provide that kind of assistance, and he never would. So I appreciate the fact that President Trump has done that, not just this year, but also last year and the year before. And so, look, my hope is that we can have a process that is fair, where everybody can be heard, and that the witnesses that don't have direct knowledge are not given the credibility of those that do have direct knowledge.
Is this alleged quid pro quo, even if it is true, legal? We often have treaties with other nations where we exchange funding for their cooperation and a variety of other matters.
Well, sure. I think the testimony we've heard so far, although it's mixed on this, indicates that, yes, there has been a lot of corruption in Ukraine, and that's true. And I've worked on that over the years, and that's certainly something that we in Congress have focused on. In fact, our aid to Ukraine has been conditioned upon them dealing with the corruption. That's corruption, broadly defined. And the question is, was the President also asking with regard to a specific issue, and particularly with regard to a political opponent? And again, that's not something that I would condone. On the other hand, I don't believe that rises to the level of impeachment and removing a president. As you say, the idea of being sure you don't have corruption before you send taxpayer money to a country is something that we commonly do. And in fact, specifically in Ukraine, under our law, we've had those provisions.
Okay, so that is routine. In recent weeks, you told the Cleveland Plain Dealer that you still plan to vote for President Donald Trump in 2020, despite this impeachment inquiry. So what criteria will you evaluate to make that decision, or has any witness testimony in these hearings changed your vote so far?
Well, look, I'm very encouraged by what we've done as a country over the last few years, particularly what happened with regard to the tax cuts, tax reform, the regulatory relief, the energy policies. We've now got in Ohio more people who are gainfully employed, making a good living, good benefits, good salaries. Wages have gone up for the past 15 weeks straight, over 3% growth for the first time in this century. We haven't done that, since you got to go back, I think, to the 1990s, maybe. Unemployment's at a 50-year low. We're exporting more of our energy than we're importing for the first time since World War II. So there's a lot of good things that are happening, and that's kind of how I would judge the performance. Is it helping working families in Ohio to be able to get ahead? And I think the answer is yes, because we've seen just a better economy. By the way, when I say wages are up, wages are particularly up among middle-income families and blue-collar workers. And that's exactly what I wanted to see come out of the tax bill. So I'm happy about that. And my hope is that we can keep that going. We can also, though, do more in terms of this trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. Right now we have a NAFTA agreement that doesn't work that well for our country. The new one will add more jobs to America. So it brings jobs, in effect, from Canada and Mexico to the United States, particularly auto jobs, manufacturing jobs, which is great for the Valley. Also, it's good for our farmers who need the help right now. Prices have been low. The weather has been terrible. A lot of farmers couldn't even get their crop in the spring, and then we had a big dry spell. So they really want this agreement because it'll let them sell more of their stuff.
All right, Ohio Senator Rob Portman, thank you for joining us here on the Weekend Show to give us insight into what is happening in Washington and the pulse on the situation there right now.